Star Wars is not just movies, it is a promise. Each trilogy declares what story the audience is joining and what emotional journey they will follow, but the sequels never told us that promise. They arrived with massive legacy characters, a brand that shaped entire generations, and hype so loud you could hear it from light years away, and yet the marketing barely explained what the new saga was actually about. Instead, the messaging leaned on mystery, nostalgia and silence, hoping that leaving everything vague would make fans curious, but it only made them unsure. In this video, we are going to break down why the sequels did not fail, because of what was on screen, but because the marketing never told the audience what these movies were offering. The Force Awakens was marketed like a museum tour. Remember this ship, remember this droid, remember that famous shot from a previous movie. It was a non-stop reminder that Star Wars is back, but it never answered the most basic storytelling question: what is the actual conflict? Every trailer featured shots that felt like teaser moments without meaning. Desert planet masked, villains, stormtroopers. Dramatic flashes of Rey looking emotional, but no clear explanation of who she was or what she wanted. The marketing relied on the brand name alone, assuming that simply pointing the camera at Star Wars imagery would carry the entire emotional weight. But audiences do not bond with aesthetics, they bond with intentions. If you go back and watch the trailers, almost nothing in them tells you what the trilogy is about. The big hook was literally Find Luke, which is more like a side quest than a narrative spine. The clearest emotional beat was Rey saying, "I am no one." And while that is intriguing, as a character setup, the marketing refused to tell the audience what she was striving for or why she mattered beyond mystery. Mystery can work when the mystery has boundaries, but the campaign pushed mystery, as the entire pitch, meaning fans spent 2 years guessing instead of connecting. Finn was placed front and centre on every poster, holding a lightsaber, and every ad implied he was positioned to be the new Jedi, which created genuine excitement and curiosity. People walked into The Force Awakens, ready to watch a former stormtrooper rise to become a Force hero, and that expectation shaped how audiences interpreted every moment of the marketing. But the film never delivered on that promise, leaving viewers confused because the marketing and the script were telling two completely different stories. Marketing sets, expectations, movies pay them off, and when those two things clash, the audience feels misled, even when the film itself has great moments. The Force Awakens was sold as a mystery box trailer filled with what-if questions, instead of a story trailer built around who these people are and why we should care. When you build a trilogy around teasing, rather than promising, you create hype but not loyalty. The result was simple: audiences liked what they saw but were unsure what they were signing up for, and that uncertainty followed the sequel trilogy from the first teaser onward. And because the marketing refused to define the core themes, viewers took their own guesses. Some believed Rey was connected to Luke, some believed Finn was the chosen Jedi, some believed Kylo would be redeemed, but the marketing never guided the interpretation. That strategy works when you already have a strong narrative roadmap, but when you do not know the destination, you cannot afford silence in the pitch. The sequels were treated like a mystery product launch instead of a story that needed emotional clarity, and the audience felt that lack of direction instantly. The first angle of failure is simple. The marketing leaned on nostalgia instead of meaning, as if returning to the galaxy was enough to justify a trilogy. When you compare the marketing to campaigns like The Hunger Games or The Lord of the Rings, those movies communicated purpose in a single sentence: save your district, destroy the ring, win the rebellion. The sequels never gave a sentence like that. There was no single idea fans could repeat that explained what the trilogy stood for. That missing sentence is the root of the problem. Marketing exists to tell audiences why they should care, not to remind them of what they already loved. By refusing to define a theme, the trailers accidentally created a guessing contest, and when the story did not match the guesses, frustration filled the gaps. Fans were not confused because of the plot. They were confused because they were told to expect something without knowing what that something was. Mystery sells curiosity, but clarity sells investment. The sequels chose curiosity without clarity. The Force Awakens was not a weak film, but the campaign around it was an empty shell full of visuals, without direction and questions without answers. A franchise this large cannot rely on vague feelings to carry an entire trilogy. Viewers need a reason to return, and not just the promise of more reveals. If the marketing had told audiences what story they were entering, instead of what secrets were being hidden, the trilogy would have started with confidence, instead of confusion. And that misunderstanding set the foundation for everything that would later collapse. The Last Jedi approached its marketing differently, but created a new problem instead of nostalgia. The message became subversion. But even then, the trailers refused to tell the audience what the story was about. Most of the promotional material focused on shock value, hints of Rey turning hints of Kylo, changing vague quotes about the Jedi ending. But there was no emotional roadmap explaining why this chapter mattered. Instead of inviting viewers into a journey, the campaign dared them to guess what twist would happen next. Audiences walked in expecting answers, and walked out realizing the movie was built around challenging expectations, rather than building toward a unifying goal. Marketing cannot rely on surprise as the pitch, because surprises only matter when built on clarity. Rey was the center of the promotional push, yet the marketing never defined her struggle, beyond implying that her lineage held the key to her identity and purpose. Every poster lined her up visually, like inheriting legacy. Every interview hinted at revelation. Every teaser framed her as the answer to a huge mystery. But when the narrative revealed that her origin was irrelevant, the audience reaction did not stem from the idea itself. It came from the marketing promising a reveal that never existed. Expectations are not born from movies, they are born from ads, and Lucasfilm built expectations around a reveal instead of growth. Finn experienced the same disconnect the trailers positioned him as the next Jedi in The Force Awakens. But in The Last Jedi, the marketing could not position him at all. He became visually present, but narratively directionless because the campaign did not know what his role in the story was supposed to be. Meanwhile, Kylo Ren was sold with a clear theme, inner conflict, anger, fear, trying to define himself outside of legacy. If that level of clarity had been applied to all three leads, the trilogy could have built a unified, emotional spine. Instead, each character was marketed using different promises. Rey was mystery. Finn was potential. Kylo was struggle, creating three unrelated selling points instead of one cohesive identity. Marketing needs a central pitch to unite its story. The original trilogy had one restore hope. The prequels had one watch the rise and fall of a chosen hero, but the sequels never declared a purpose. Trailers are not posters, they are statements of storytelling identity, and the sequels never stated theirs. The Rise of Skywalker had the most intense marketing crisis of all, because instead of building on the previous films, the campaign tried to sell itself as the grand finale, without defining what the finale was resolving. Suddenly, Emperor Palpatine was the hook, but there was no setup in prior marketing to prepare the audience for that reveal. The switches between nostalgia, mystery, and shock meant the audience was constantly promised a different movie each time. Every film felt like a different pitch, and no trilogy can survive when every part tries to communicate a new purpose. The marketing failed not because the material was weak, but because the campaigns never committed to a singular message or story identity. Star Wars is a fan-driven universe, meaning people do not show up because of the brand, they show up because they know what story they are joining. When marketing avoids clarity and leans on legacy, the audience becomes passive rather than connected. To win back investment, you need to declare the emotional journey at the start, not rely on mystery to carry it. The takeaway is simple. The sequels did not lose fans because of the films themselves. They lost fans because the marketing never invited them into the story. A brand does not create loyalty, story creates loyalty. If the marketing had been clear about the themes, the focus and the character arcs, the audience would have known where the trilogy was taking them, and confusion would have been replaced with excitement. The sequels did not fail, the marketing did because the story was hidden instead of shared. If you compare this to films like The Dark Knight, the marketing told audiences exactly what the emotional core was: chaos challenging order, Batman pushed to his limit. Or consider Avatar, which pitched one idea: protect the world you love. That clarity gave viewers a reason to stay engaged from trailer to credits. The sequel trilogy never declared that kind of purpose. It asked audiences to take a leap of faith without telling them where they were leaping. Marketing is a promise, and every broken promise weakens the relationship between creator and audience. By the time The Rise of Skywalker arrived, fans were not debating story choices, they were still trying to understand what story the trilogy had been trying to tell in the first place. If you do not define the core theme, then viewers fill in that gap with their own expectations, and those expectations will collide with reality. Star Wars needed direction, the audience needed clarity, and the marketing needed purpose. From the very beginning. The trilogy shows what happens when each movie has its own pitch instead of one unified identity. The result is fragmented anticipation instead of collective excitement. Fans did not abandon the trilogy because they disliked Star Wars. They stepped away because they never knew what they were being asked to care about. When storytelling lacks purpose, the audience wanders. When marketing lacks focus, the audience disconnects. The most valuable lesson is that mystery can be exciting, but meaning's what creates loyalty and long-term investment. Star Wars will always succeed when it invites people into the emotional journey, not when it hides it behind puzzles and reveals.
Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that share button. My main channel is Critical Analysis Hub, where I post Star Wars content about the movies. My secondary channel is Critical Analysis Hub Plus, where I focus on the shows of Star Wars. And my third channel is Critical Analysis Hub XP, where I post comic books. Be sure to take a moment and check them out. Thanks, and may the Force be with you.